to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today in the show, we have Lester Gottesman. He is a colorectal surgeon, and he wrote the Kevin MD article, Zoom is foie gras of the brain. Lester, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
In 25 words or less, I had a lot of forks in the road. I was going to go into internal medicine, and my last year of medical school had an epiphany that I was going to surgery, which I did. I trained in New York City and then did a couple of fellowships, one in surgical oncology and then colorectal surgery. And then as things, people choose their specialty based on mentorship, basically. And the person I most admired and who I wound up working with was someone who I truly admired and loved. We were fellow adventurers, and in physical stuff, we both did a lot of expeditions and mountaineering trips, and also intellectually. And we shared a lot of common passions about learning stuff and interesting people and that sort of stuff. And then I joined him, and that was a wonderful time. And then he retired, and so here I am.
And from the standpoint of a colorectal surgeon, tell me how the pandemic is affecting your practice and what you're seeing.
Well, what we're seeing as a colorectal surgeon, we're seeing a drop-off in preventive medicine. So there's a drop-off in colonoscopy screenings. People tend to ignore taking care of themselves. Typically, they do a lot of doctor Googling and come up with stuff, where they have telemedicine consultations with their primary carers who, have a tough time getting colorectal disease right when they see the patient. So now it's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of special anal disease is visual, and it's very hard for a non-specialist to take care of these patients. So that's a big impact. Views are going longer. And there is data that colorectal cancer rates are increasing, and the severity of that presentation is increasing also.
All right, let's transition into your Kevin MD article, Zoom is foie gras of the brain. Now, for those who haven't read the article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
I'm sure many of you are doing a lot of Zoom conferences. And then on top of it, because we're self-selected as a curious bunch and think we're smart, we tend to do a lot of extracurricular Zoom activities. And, I'm a voracious book reader, but now I have access to all these phenomenal Zoom lectures. And so I started signing up for a million Zoom lectures on everything and anything under the sun. And then I just found that what I was doing is I had the mandatory medical lectures and CME lectures, and then I would do my few hours of extracurricular lectures. And I found myself, I was walking home one day and I said, I am just stuffing these things into my brain. My brain is exploding. And I feel like a goose getting stuffed in order to make delicious liver food for humans. And so that's where the idea came from. But I think the more I researched it, I think what I'm trying to say in the article is that we're doing a disservice to ourselves by attempting to just keep on stuffing information into our head. And there's some, data on the bad effects to the brain of doing this. And there's data that you're not helping yourself. And we should sort of step back and just say, one, we have to have a proper Zoom etiquette on chats and on calls, and that we should be more self-selected in what we do, and not just take a CME course just for credit, but if we really need to learn something. So we should be guardians of our brain, self-select, which courses we want, and be kinder to ourselves. So that's sort of the gist of my article.
So one thing you mentioned was about Zoom etiquette. So tell me about some of the issues related to that in some of the Zoom CME conferences that you've attended.
One of the things that I mentioned in the article is, this chat function that we have. And basically, as a speaker, if you keep on chatting somebody during their talk, that's like interrupting them. So it's like giving grand rounds and someone's getting up every 2 seconds and screaming something at you. And it's very distracting to the speaker. Because it's so virtual, people don't think twice about it. But I think we should not have chats in real time, that we should sort of save the chats till the end, like we do normally. We don't interrupt speakers typically. And the other thing is the camera, and there's some decent data that says that if you camera is faced one way, that you appear like higher than your other person on Zoom or lower, or if you get too close, that sets up this like startle response that you feel threatened.
Mhm.
So there has to be a lot of just setting up the calls and just being kind to each other and be cognizant of the limitations of the camera and the screen, and cognizant of the chat function that basically amounts to interruption.
Now, as a participant of several of these Zoom CME conferences, do you have any advice and tips to other participants in terms of how they can get the most out of that Zoom experience?
Choose which ones you want to go to. I mean, a lot of people do CMEs just to get points.
Mhm.
So, I think that if that's what you're trying to do, just be honest with yourself, and don't share video and read a book while you're doing the conference, and you'll get your CMEs. It's not ethical, but also trying to fill your brain with garbage is also not good.
Mhm.
So I think just pick, there's so many CMEs available now that are free, that just pick the ones that you feel like you will get something out of, and just avoid the ones that are, every society has 20 million CME conferences, and just don't feel like you're obliged to take them. And I think that would be the best advice I could give.
We're talking to Lester Gottesman. He is a colorectal surgeon, and he wrote the Kevin MD article, Zoom is foie gras of the brain. Lester, we were speaking in the beginning of January, and hopefully by this time next year, the pandemic will be behind us. What do you see the role of Zoom and other virtual tools in the conference world after the pandemic?
I think they will continue. I think there will be, historically, if you look at contemporaneous literature from the 1918 flu epidemic and the bubonic plague and different ones, and there's something that happens after each of these plagues. In the States, we had the Roaring Twenties after the 1918 pandemic. And I think there will be a rebound once the vaccinations get to what people think are herd immunity. I think there will be a swing all the way to get rid of Zoom conferences. And then they'll come back with some happy medium. But I think there will be a swing against teleconferencing, and then we'll find some happy medium where patients will ask for more teleconferences for convenience sake because they could do it. And I think the Zoom conferences will be an adjunct to live conferences, so that most every live conference will have a Zoom type link with it. Yeah, people do want that connection of company, of people.
And my final question, Lester, what's your take home message you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
My take home message is the same one that I give my residents. It's always question everything. Just look at everything as how can you make it better? What's wrong about what we know? And just try to improve what you have to make it better for the next person.
Lester, Thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
Kevin, pleasure.